Alright, today we're going to be working on this Hayward variable speed pull pump. The bearings went out on the front of it, and I've got some of the parts disassembled already. Here's what the back part it looks like. Here's some of the inner guts. Here's what the front part looks like, and some of the plates. So on the disassembly, what we're going to do is we're going to take this screw off, and when we do that, we can pull this piece right here up in the air, in theory. Here we go. And if you want, you can unplug that little red connector there, separate those two pieces, and then underneath there you got this other little box, and it's got these screws. There's 3 screws. Take those out. You can pull this piece up in the air, and it's got a little connector down there that connects right there on that red piece. So that pops off. On the back here, we've got this shroud. Couldn't get the screws off here, and I think there's a screw on this side. Those screws snapped off pretty quick, so I had to just leave them snapped at this point. I'll try to glue that on, or I think it's pretty taut when you put it on, so it might be good enough just to leave snapped back on the final assembly. And then what we have is this box right here. There's a screw on this side and a screw on the other side here. Basically, you can take those off. And then we have one more screw, which is down here. There's a hole there right now. Take those 3 screws out, and then this control box could, in theory, come off. Up inside of the control box, there's a blue connector there. You can wiggle that off, and then once the blue connector comes out of this box here, you can then take this box and put it off to the side. At that point, what I was trying to do originally, after taking this piece off, pop that off with the 4 bolts, I was trying to drill out these screws, and that wasn't going too well. So what I decided to do is just leave those screws in there, and then I picked up my handy dandy Harbor Freight bearing puller, and I put that on here. Basically put this little tip right there. You can kind of see a little nipple indentation where it went, so I put that there, and then I clipped one claw on one side and one claw on the other side, and then I did some screwing of the middle bolt here. And then what happened is let's see, I guess before I did that, I had to remove these 4 screws in the back. Super long screws. There's 4 of them, equally spaced around the perimeter on the back. Luckily, my screws did not snap. Sometimes they snap, and that's not usually a great outcome. So coming back to the front with the bearing puller assembly, what I did is I got this bearing puller on here, and when I tighten the bolt, basically this top piece right here kind of came up, and it left the bearing on the shaft, and this whole plate right here just popped right off. It bent some of the metal pieces that were attached to the bolts here, but I didn't really care about that because those things are kind of a pain in the butt. Once you take off the cap here, you can try to do something with those screws. In my case, I just left the fingers bent. They kind of snug up the bearing, and it's pretty taut anyway, so I wasn't worried about putting those fingers back in place how they were originally. Once I took off this cap here, I could see the bearing back on that side, and the bearing wasn't completely seized up, but it was enough to where it was pretty tight when I was spinning the fan. Also down here there were some drain holes on both sides that were a little bit plugged up, so that probably wasn't helping the cause of keeping the inside of this motor dry and clutter free with debris and sand and stuff like that, DE. Also on the back side here, there's I think that's an Allen wrench, a 5/16. I put the Allen wrench in here so I could take off the original little spinny thing that screws on here. So I was able to get all that apart, and then once I got this cap off here, I could actually pull this whole inner guts out of this piece right here. And what I also noticed as I was putting the bearing pullers here and kind of pulling this top right here, it was pulling up this black piece away from the bottom cap, so it caused a little gap to appear down at the bottom, which was kind of handy because then you can inspect the bearing on the back side here. Once the cap is off, I stood this bottom piece up here on the floor, and I took this shaft right here and popped the whole inner guts out of the black cylinder case. The center shaft has got some strong magnets on the center, so it was a little bit snug trying to pull that out without having it get stuck on the side, but you can do it, especially when this thing is resting on the floor and you're raising and lowering the shaft through the black cylinder. In order to replace this top bearing here, there is a keeper washer underneath here that I had to take off first, and then I got my bearing puller and popped off the bearing underneath here pretty quickly. And then once I put the new bearing in there, I put this cap back on here, and I've got a large socket that fit over the shaft, and I basically pounded this cap back on, and it basically pounded the bearing down and seated it on the shaft right here. Let me go get the old bearing so you can see what that looks like. Here is the old bearing. It's the ever popular 6203 DS, looks like, or DG. Yeah, it's a DG, made in China. I think that's a supplier, NSK. But yeah, I mean, this thing, if I try to spin it, it spins. It's kind of taut spinning, so it was definitely overheating the motor. The motor was shutting down on speed 1. Didn't have enough force inside the motor to keep it nice and happy. But anyway, this I'm going to try out now. I put it back together and was spinning the shaft. It felt pretty decent, so I think it's going to be good, but I wanted to pull a few pieces off just to go through the bearing replacement. Hopefully you find this helpful. These replacement motors are pretty expensive, so we'll see what happens when I get this back together. Hopefully you like the video. Please like, share, and subscribe.